Everyone. Good evening and welcome to St. Paul's, to those who are in person, but also to those who are online. My name is Kelly and I serve as one of the associates here at St. Paul's, and we are just so grateful that you all are here. This Faith and Culture Conversation series began in the fall of 2020 during COVID. So this is actually our first one in person in a hybrid model, which is very exciting, and we appreciate your grace as we adapt to this new format. So with the Faith and Culture Conversations, it's an opportunity for us to have really important conversations about critical issues in our community and in our world through a faith-based lens, and also to get to know some community partners in our own community here in Richmond and in our region. So I'm also so grateful to introduce our two co-hosts who have been with us since the beginning, two parishioners here at St. Paul's. So first we have Dave Coogan, who is an associate professor of English at the Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU. And then we have Christine Lakritz-Marquis, who is an associate professor of church history at Union Presbyterian Seminary here in Richmond, as well as the director of the THM program. So I am so grateful again for you all to be here, and now I will pass things over to Dave.
All right. Hey, I don't know, you need a microphone, really? You're right in front of me. But I'll use the microphone. I've been told to use the microphone. I'm glad you're all here. I'm so glad that we were able to convene in person and to join everybody online as well. This series, Faith, Culture, and Racial Reconciliation, is an important series for me. It's a great topic that you can really never get enough of because the work is ongoing, and we have two amazing people here to get us into this conversation tonight. I'm going to introduce Danita Green over here. I'm going to read to you this thing, and then I'm going to amplify because I've known Danita for a while. So this is what it says. Okay, but you should know that she is a trauma healer and the co-CEO of Coming Together Virginia, which was formerly called Coming to the Table RVA, a nonprofit committed to racial healing in the city known as the capital of the Confederacy, the former capital of the Confederacy. As the only African American in leadership of an inclusivity group in RVA, she facilitates the courageous yet clumsy conversation on race, social equity, and the legacy of the American slave trade for a mixed-race audience with over 1,200 online members and 300 active participants. So I came to know Danita over 10 years ago, I believe. Sometime, yeah, because she's also an author. This bio doesn't say that, but we have to point out that she's the author of two books, one on African American genealogy, and the other is a fictional work about women and the ones that they love who are incarcerated, which is how we got connected, because at that time I was working on my book, Writing Our Way Out, Memoirs from Jail. Since then, Danita has developed that book into a play, and if you look around the city at key events where racial reconciliation is happening, you will find her name and presence around it. And so I know Coming to the Table was the latest iteration of that for me. In any event, Coming to the Table does great work, and she's brought with her her friend Marcia, who is also a part of the organization. So I'm going to turn it over to Danita to introduce Marcia.
All right, thank you, David, and hi, everybody. Very glad to be here, and we didn't know, I had been away for about 8 days, so I invited Marcia yesterday, to do this, but I want to start out with saying that Marcia Summers has become a very good friend of mine, and to have her with the organization and us being in dual roles of being co-CEOs has been just wonderful. Sharing ideas and thoughts and prayers on how we can help to heal our city and bring people together across the racial divide. And I feel very uncomfortable speaking for Marcia Summers. So I'm going to hand the microphone over to her so she can introduce herself.
I was going to say, I'm liable to correct her if she tries to tell my story. So I got to know Danita, probably met her first maybe 8 years ago, I would guess, right at the very beginnings of the organization coming to the table, RVA, before it was an official nonprofit, when it was totally volunteer and tiny. Everybody fit around one table. And it all kind of took off in the fall of 2019. So my background is more in church, Presbyterian church in this case. And my husband was a pastor at First Pres. But we came from two interracial churches in our 40 years in churches. One in Washington, D.C., a very middle-class black congregation of black and white working for governments. And then in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we were right across from the oldest housing project in Charlotte, in a racially mixed congregation. So church and race have been just totally entwined for me. I loved singing in the gospel choir as much as I loved singing in the symphony choir. So, and just, yeah. So it was a natural for me to hook up with them. Yeah. And I guess we've been, and for the last 2.5 years, I've been co-CEO with Danita on the operations side more than on the program side. But I have lots of opinions.
Okay, so you have to share the mic, just so you know. To no, so we're so excited to have you both here and to hear some of those opinions. So our first sort of question to the two of you is if you could describe for us what you know about faith and how you came to know it. So how did you learn to engage faith?
Okay, that's a really general question. I was raised in church, Baptist church, and that was a big part of my growing up. And I've always been a very spiritual person, faith-filled. I think I have to tell the truth about this, though, okay? Yes. As I matured and saw more of the world, went to college, I had a moment when I really questioned my faith quite a bit. So even I'm looking at, when I look at the walls and the windows and I see the representations that were in my family's home, my African-American family's home, even of the white Jesus, I was perplexed by that for a long time. So I think about geography and where the people in the Bible lived and the description. So I was concerned about that. When I went to college and I learned things about the slave Bible. Have you guys heard of the slave Bible? There was during enslavement, okay, there was a Bible created just for enslaved people, and you can Google this, whoever has a phone in here. I want you to think I'm saying anything that's not correct. Where we where enslaved people were encouraged to believe in God and the scriptures, but anything that said anything about all people being free was taken out. And so they were presented with a very different Bible. I am a graduate of the University of Virginia, and this was also during the time of the Sally Hemings story, which was like a bomb going off on our campus. And being able to have conversations with folks who very openly would tell me that, you know, this couldn't have happened. This white man would not have had a relationship with this black woman because that just wouldn't ever happen. ever. And we also heard the same thing in chapel at school when we went. So I mentioned this. I do have faith, and I pray, and I look to God for answers, but I went through a long period of my life questioning what I was being taught in church. And some people say I'm way too proud to say this, but truly, I've been asked to leave or more churches than I've been a member of in my life. Mostly because I ask a lot of questions all the time. Excuse me, can you help me understand? Sometimes my faith leaders haven't been willing to take that much time with me. I got a whole story about when I went to Ghana. Was it Ghana? No, it was Kenya. I went to Kenya in 1999 with, I don't know if you want to hear all this now. Yes. But with Faith Landmark, which I chose because it was a very diverse church with diverse congregants, and I loved that. We had an opportunity to go to Kenya because we had two Kenyan pastors, young men that we were training, that our ministers were training to go back. And so we had decided that we were going to take this whole group of 70 of us over, and we were going to bring doctors and dentists and professionals, and we were going to take clothes, and we were going to take a lot of the children. We took 20 children from our congregation to go, and they worked on a play to present, and all that was great. So I walked in on the practice for the play, and I noticed that all of the lead roles were given to white kids, and all of the secondary roles in the backstage help, which I am a stage hand. I'm trained for that, so there's no prejudice there. But still, I was uncomfortable with that. And so I brought it up to our church leadership and mentioned it, thinking that that would be the good thing to do. And they really rebuked me on that. They said, well, obviously your faith isn't strong enough to know that we're bringing the word of the Lord and it's going to be fine. I said, well, okay, yeah, we are. But if you want anybody to hear it, you might want to think about recasting this. So we went with the show as it was. And of course, that first day we had to totally redo the show. The first night we were in Kenya, because people did not hear it. They could not appreciate it. So anyway, all of that is to say, I have a ton of stories to that effect, where I had always felt like my faith had been challenged by the people I looked up to as my faith leaders. And I'm very proud to say, and you'll like this part, I held on to that notion for the longest time until I went to the Black Episcopalian conference in July of this year. And I was sitting with a young pastor that had just come out of Virginia Theological Seminary. And I was telling him about the many times. I have a gay son, and he's a professional dancer and choreographer, and he wanted to dance in church, but he couldn't dance in church because A, he was a boy, and B, he was a gay boy. So out of that church we went. So that happens quite, everything that could have possibly happened, I just felt like God was just like, no, you're not one of mine. So, but anyway, when I met this particular pastor, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name right now, young guy, about 40 years old, and I was telling him about the 4 or 5 times I'd been kicked out of church. Well, I was kicked out of Catholic church too, but that's a long story. They called my husband and said, she can't come back. Again, asking too many questions, because I just need answers. So we were sitting at the conference, Episcopalian conference in D.C., and I was saying all this, and this young man, between the appetizer and taking the first bite of his steak, he said, oh, no, your worship is in the street. What you do is church. And yeah. I couldn't believe, and he said it so matter of fact, like, don't you know that, stupid? I've been able to look at what we do as just that. It is bringing people together for church and to understand and to fellowship in a very different way. And I guess that's my faith story, but it's a good one. I embrace it.
So I also grew up in the church, only as you've heard, I stayed in the church. I had my college also years of taking, for me it wasn't race that was race was always an issue from about 13 years old on. But the whole idea of the exclusive nature of Christianity and a God of the whole universe and everything that ever was and ever will be, condemning whole swaths of people for whatever reason as groups, because just made no sense. It makes a whole lot more sense, and still does, to me, that God comes and reveals in stories that fit the culture where they are. That doesn't fit always with a lot of Presbyterians, so you can imagine. It wouldn't have fit with the church I grew up in either. But as far as the faith formation, it was really strong that I got in a family that the church really was extended family. We never knew when somebody was going to be dropping in for dinner, when we might find somebody's asleep on the living room floor in the morning when we got up, just depending on what was going on. And I grew up with a kind of simplicity of maybe a faith that believed when the Sunday school teachers said, God loves all the children, red and yellow, black and white. All are precious in God's sight. And so my first experience with racism was the LA riots. And our church group of youth got permission from parents to go in and be in Watts. Right as the fires were beginning to die down, we were supposed to help clean up, supposedly, but of course insurance companies won't let you do that. So instead we went to the beach together. And here from this church and community center, the group of 30 kids plus our group of 15, there were most of those kids had not been to the beach that was 5 miles away. They had not seen the ocean. We went and were having a great time walking along the beach when we got approached by a policeman who said, your group is going to have to leave the beach. This family got sand kicked on their blankets. So all 40, 45 people had to get back on the bus and leave a day at the beach. So that was my first awareness of race. And it was very connected with my church and the faith that I'd grown up with. It was, as I've looked back on it, it was the first time that I knew that racism was all over, not just in the bad old South, which, I'd seen the stuff on TV at 13 or 14, but so that was an awakening, beginning of an awakening there. When my husband retired from active pastorate, my first decision probably was, and even before he retired, I thought, I want to be part of the church in the streets. I want to be not giving all of my time to an institution. No, I mean, it's the people out there. But I now am feeling called back into, with this work, into the church family, and where I am working to help people learn to have the conversations and begin to be the family of God that we're supposed to be.
Thank you both so much. I just wanted to say, personally, as a church historian who's seen the church be a lot of things, I just want to applaud both of you for leaning into that, because it can be really hard. We have a long history, which is short in the grand scheme of things, where the church seems to be one thing. So thank you for the work of making church bigger.
Yeah, and I love that phrase, church in the street. And I think, you know, based on the answers you gave about how you came to know your faith in church and then how you discovered it in this work in the streets, it segues nicely to our next question and the topic for tonight, which is racial reconciliation. So I thought maybe we could just start off, if you could, each one of you, give your definition of reconciliation first, as you understand that in your faith tradition, and then maybe segue into talking more about racial reconciliation, the work that you've been doing apart but also together in Coming Together Virginia. Yeah.
That's a lot. Okay. So, well, it's terrible. We struggled a long time in coming to the table. The previous name, Coming to the Table National, and our Richmond chapter, even just the word reconciliation. I don't know if you remember any of that, because there are many people, particularly African American people, to say that we were never reconciled. To begin, so to go back to to pick up where we left off. Nah, as my son would say, you know, that's a notion, but it's not real. We need to, but I also feel that even being cognizant of that we are looking at the language and questioning it like that is important to this conversation. It gives us an opportunity to look at our separate history and our joined history and just decide where we want to be on that side of the coin. And what does reconciliation mean? Well, okay, so for me, it would mean would mean starting again. And that's the way I hold it in my heart and headspace right now. And it's a of a lot of different things. You can't re-up about faith without re-upping about community and where you fit, because we are all called to be part of a community, right? And what that looks like. If I'm going to reconcile, if I'm going to re-up, it causes me to think about not only race, but my relationship with all of the integral people and parts of a community, my elders and the young people, the children, the people who have different thoughts about sexuality, different thoughts about everything, cuisine, even, just everything. Can I reconcile that we live in a world where we walk the same places, but we are very, very different in culture and apart? And can we take the time to go back and consider that we all started pretty much from the same seed, you know? So can we go back and find that place of brokenness? And that's a lot of what we do in Coming Together Virginia, because we have to be able to face a past before we can start moving into a future for this place of conciliation or reconciliation. And it's no mistake or coincidence that we didn't necessarily plan it this way, but we work with a lot of Christian people, church people, to do this work. And there's so much questioning going on that makes us also have to look back and reconcile our faith and what it has taken us through, and then work together to form a vision of what's possible. So it's always, I love words, and David knows that. I'm always thinking about how we use language. This is going back to where I started with this, conciliation and reconciliation. So I went to a wedding, and I was talking to my 10-year-old who helped us, one of my 10-year-old great-nephews, I guess he'd be called, 10-year-old. And I was explaining to him what it is I do for a living. You talk to a 10-year-old now, he's like, okay, well, you're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer, you're not a teacher, you're not a cook, what are you? And so I was explaining to him about what we do. And he just looked at me, he said, oh, you're facilitating the future.
That has become our byline with our logo.
Yes. And he said it. He said it so plainly and got another piece of the wedding cake and walked away. And I'm like, I'm gonna be working for him one day, because that's exactly what we're doing. And in that facilitation, so much of it has to come with the idea, the concept of looking at the past, looking at where we are, being in this dialectical tension place that we're in now, and reconciling. And this is what the other thing he said, that's why I brought that up, the wreck of it. We got to wreck it all up to be able to come to a place of conciliation. That's where the conversation went at the wedding. So we're wrecking it up. We're tearing it down. And we are in the business of hopefully helping people to open up a place in their hearts and mind with that wrecking ball to see a new vision. So I feel like I rambled a lot, but that's it.
No, that was great. So I kind of want to follow up and sort of, I'll give this one to Marcia if that's okay, because this will sort of touch on that, which is, if a culture is known by its values, traditions, and achievements of a group, what best characterizes the culture of racial reconciliation community that you guys are trying to build at Coming Together Virginia? What is the culture of this movement of reconciliation?
Okay, if you say something other than what I think you
I have, from about the beginning, 2016, spring of 2016, and you know what has been happening, and you know what has been happening, and what was going on then. And I was really involved then in coming to the table, RVA. And for me, that was the culture of faith and church. It was a church body, and it became more and more that, whether people knew it or not, that there was a culture of family, no matter what. And for me personally, it was realizing that reading the books by Black authors and watching the movies and hearing the thoughts and the stories, it was filling in a whole wing of my family's history. If I'm the family of Jesus, then this is my family too. And so I need to know Danita's story to be family. I need to know the way that experiences have affected Danita and her theology and her relationship to the institutional church, and know if I'm going to be family. So am I on the right track for that? Okay, that's that culture for me. And it's part of what's making it more important to me to not, we have in Coming to the Table and Coming Together Virginia, the last few years, we try very much to be open and not just non-political, no, because we are political. We may not be partisan exactly, but we are political, from my opinion, my stance. But not to be non-sectarian, I guess. So to be open to any faith background or no faith background. If the Spirit, universal Spirit, is calling you to this place, then you are part of the family. And we work with each other and we talk together, and from Brian Stevenson, proximity, proximity, proximity. The more we are together, the more chance we have of coming to reconciliation or to conciliation. And I'm going to cheat and say reconciliation to me, because of my centeredness in the faith that I grew up with, is reconciliation to God. That right now too much of who we are and what we are, in the church as well as in the society as a whole, needs to be reconciled to God.
Can I interject there, Marcia? I got my mic. You might need to give it to Danita. I'm not sure, but either one of you can take it though, because you mentioned sectarian and you mentioned political, and I understand your distinction between partisan and political. I think that's a great distinction. When I think of political, I just think of the polis, the root of the word of the city, and who rules the fate of the city or the nation state. And so I understand your great nephew. We're facilitating the future. That's a way that you can look at that as statesmanship, spiritual statesmanship. So, but when you mention political and in the partisan sense, and also the work it takes to hear another person's story, we shouldn't undercut that part. It's a lot of. Have you been to any of the Coming to the Table of events? They bring people around for food, and it's you're there for a little while because it takes time to hear people's stories. It's not a quick one and done thing. You sit and you listen. And I wanted to know if either of you could speak on that, if there were moments in this work where the tension between family-oriented, listening to stories, has come into conflict with other cultures that don't understand what you're doing or maybe don't value it. You can both take a shot at that one. That's a big one.
Okay, well, I'll start. I want to dovetail, though, off of where we were with the culture, because previous to this lovely lady, I was with Martha Rollins. And I think that because we found the Coming to the Table approach to be something that we thought we could come to Richmond with and have these conversations. And of course, as David mentioned, it's around food, because it's harder to fight with folks if you're having a good meal. So it only makes sense. But we talked about how we were going to build community and how we were going to affect culture. And basically what we came up with, because I wanted to jump right into reparations, at first. Because I felt that it's important, and I wanted to be able to get people to understand that it was not solely about money. Yes, if they write checks, I want to be the first in line. However, it's not about that. And we started using words in a way to help build the community of coming to the table. So it was just important to me for our National Day of Racial Healing that would be directed toward reparations, the bugaboo that nobody wanted to talk about. So we started using the term, repair, but before then it was creating a culture of repair. Creating a culture of repair. And that did several things. It gave people first an aha moment of, oh, there are things that need to be fixed? Yes. Is it important that we fix things in our lives? Surely. Is it important that we help other people fix things in their lives? Can we be accountable for that work that needs to be done. And then it went from that to creating a culture of repair with uncompromising compassion. Yes. Which meant that can you look at someone who maybe doesn't look like you, doesn't go to your church, that doesn't live where you live, you didn't go to the school, and can you put yourself in a place where you can find their humanity and be one with them just long enough to be accountable for their success as well. And we were able to go into houses of faith with that kind of thinking and using that kind of language. And so people began to hear it differently. And we kind of back-ended the reparations thing that way. But and that's what reparations is all about. Not that we were necessarily talking about that, but it's so important that it's not solely a black and white issue. It is something so much bigger than that. It's really opening the door to being, I would say, what God would really truly want us to be. Accountable for each other. All of us. And that doesn't mean simply, and I use the words freely, white people taking care of black people. It means all of us taking care of everybody. Being able to understand that that is truly what we are called to do, unmistakably. So, I don't know if I, yeah. Okay, fine. And I'll get passionate about stuff.
Good, you should.
Do you want to take a crack at that, and maybe we'll go to questions?
Have a repeat of the question, or move on.
All right, so
Go ahead.
I get the questions. I don't have the mic. We're figuring this out in person. This question is to both of you, but I'd love to hear from Marcia, because I think you have framed it sort of differently from that story of the LA riots. So as you think about sort of your work here, how has your faith been, like what aspects of your faith have been foundational to what you do?
Okay. Peacemaking is a piece of it. And I grew up in one of the historical peace churches, Church of the Brethren. That would be part of the foundational. The Sermon on the Mount, absolutely, with how do you treat your enemy, not just your neighbor, but you love your enemy. And like I said, there's a certain kind of, I don't know, simplicity in a way to my faith that takes it at its word. If Jesus says, treat enemies as your brothers and sisters, and tells the older brother in the what's the story? Dang. The prodigal son. I've just been reading Prodigal God, and that was just okay. Yeah. The older brother is hard-hearted toward the younger brother. I mean, there are just all of those stories, and the prophets have been very foundational. I mean, they scare me. But I think the one that scares me the most and makes me move closer and closer to real activism, if I don't count yet, I'm not sure, is the verse that warns of being that God will leave them to the devices and desires of their own hearts. I don't want to be left to the devices and desires of a heart that's hard. I want to be a part of a community whose desires of the heart line up as closely as we grow into them to the heart of God.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Well, thank you both for those remarks. You've set us up perfectly for all of your questions and comments. You do have questions. Yes. Oh. This will be the question mic?
And I will be the runner.
Ms. Green, you said you started out with creating a culture of repair, and then you added on something about compassion. Can you reframe that one more time, or re-say that one more time?
Creating a culture of repair with uncompromising compassion.
That's the word I
And the uncompromising part is the most important part. You want to do something. I like to think that people are inherently good and still until they start really thinking and deciding, well, I don't know, that person might be not be worthy, or no, I heard that those people that live on that side of the town, they just don't work hard enough, or yeah. So that, to me, that's the important part of that. Just don't compromise. Just be compassionate wherever God has led you to be, and stay in that heart space. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, thanks. Have you encountered, when you've had one of these groups, whether it's the coming to the table or any of these, someone being hostile to your... That's a really naive question, isn't it?
I don't know how to, well, I'll just speak for myself. I smile a lot, but I can be pretty, pretty intense. And so when we first started this work, and we have great facilitators, that's the first thing. We have facilitator training, and I think we do a really good job in creating safe space for folks, and we actually think of it as a sacred space for people to share. So we don't really have too much of that. Things don't get too crazy. But yes, I've had to, kind of, let me talk to you for a second, kind of thing. People, and we are very intentional about the questions that we ask at the table. And we have 7 touchstones as well. So, and I can't rattle them off right now. You might have to help me. But confidentiality is one. Being present is another thing. Another one is, and this is really important, no one talks for a whole group of people. You only share personal stories and ideas. And that really helps a lot. Intentional listening would be the fourth one. And we also use, I don't have one with me right now, but talking pieces. You do a talking piece. And that's important too, because everybody in this room, everybody has come from some culture, cultural background, where people met in council, Yeah.
We all have our own styles, but this is one that's special.
It's the yeah. And so when we pass that, as people talk, it usually sets up a rhythm. Okay, all right, so we don't have to kind of, pull people off of the hook when they start talking too long. But it does help. But when people realize, the stories that come out at the table also from, again, somebody who may not look like you, are usually so interesting that you stop talking just so you can hear. So that's, but yes, and we have to say our facilitators are just marvelous. They are. They're very good.
And they keep learning. They keep learning and keep asking questions. And we've got volunteer trainers who are very experienced in a lot of different styles of facilitation and conversation leading. Mostly, I think that in some ways, that most of always people who come with good intention, and that's one of our touchstones. They come because they want to be repairers of the breach. They come already with hearts at least softened, maybe minds that don't know haven't learned a whole lot, because most of us didn't. And the way that we're separated in our housing, in our churches, in so many places where there might be a level ground to be able to build relationships, they're not present in the way that we're set up in most places. So the other thing that for me is one of my absolute favorites, okay, the intentions we just assume. We tell everybody, yeah, you come in and you assume that everybody here has good intentions. We may be stupid and may say dumb things sometimes. I will, and when I do, I can say, oops, that came out wrong. Let me try that again. Or Danita can say, ouch, that hurt, and explain a little bit so that I won't make that mistake again. Oops and ouch are very important. They are the forgiveness. They are the grace. They are the understanding that there's no shame and there's no shame and no blame. No shame and no blame. We've all been born into this, and we have to work to get our way out of it. It's like we've all been dropped in a pit individually. We're not even in the same pit to be able to help each other a lot of times, so on the learning part. Thank you.
I'm just curious what each of you would identify as the most personal, kind of heart-opening piece that you've participated in or been during your work with the group.
Oh, well, I'll try to be brief because there are a lot of things. The revelation that comes out at the table and beyond is just wonderful. So just briefly, I'm gonna back up a little bit. We have 4 pillars that these are like my Bible in the work, okay? How do we get from a place of where we are to where we want to be? So first, we all have to be on the same page. So truth-telling in history is extremely important. So whenever we get together, we hear the same speaker or we watch the same video, we've read the same book or article, so we're starting from the same place for that conversation. Otherwise, we'd be all over the place, okay? So truth-telling in history, doing it together is important. Doing it in a very diverse group at the table is the next thing, because we want to be able to make connections and hopefully build relationships. That's why it's not a one-and-done deal. It's like church, you know, you have to keep coming back. And when people come in, they're looking forward to seeing the people that they saw the week before, the month before. And all of this work, if you do it right, if you really have those honest heart conversations, lead to all kinds of healing. We sometimes don't even know what kind of baggage we're carrying around until we hear ourselves or hear something that someone else says, like, gosh, I didn't know that was the pain that I was holding about something that may have happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, because most of the time our ideas around race start before the age of 10 for most of us. So it's truth-telling, building relationships, healing wounds, and then the best part, taking an action. Together, right. Taking an action. If I may say, we do not want a bunch of white people coming over there to the projects telling us what we did wrong, okay? I'll just say that, okay? Allies, everyone loves to have allies, you know? People who can give us ideas and work with us, all of us do, for change. So, and for that being said, accountability for everybody, black and white, at the table is extremely important for action to really happen. So directly to your question, though, when we when I see somebody who's been to the table once, twice, 3 times, 8 times, 10 times, has taken the time to join the book group or take advantage of a third Tuesday event or something, and then I see them and they come back and say, Danita, this is what I learned, and this is what I was able to do. And I wish I knew this lady's name. I'll have to tell her really quickly. But there was a woman when we first started this work that said that, wherever she worked, she noticed that in the lunchroom, all the black people sat together and all the white people sat together. Never the two shall meet, right? And one day, after being with us for probably about a year, she decided that she was going to break that mold, and she was going to meet some of her black coworkers and make some great girlfriends. And they built relationships. And in that sharing that happened in the lunchroom, she realized after, I guess maybe probably 10 or 20 conversations, I don't know, that they were all doing the same job, but this white woman was making more than her black counterparts. Ooh, and I won't tell you where that, but I do know where that was, I won't say. And so when they came up for job review, evaluation, she got a shining evaluation. It was great, and she said right before she walked out, she picked up her pocketbook and she said, there is one thing. And she mentioned that she knew that those black women who were her friends now didn't make as much money. And that caused a shift, not only in that arena of friends, but in that whole culture at that business. And when I hear stuff like that, I truly, truly rejoice. I truly do, because that is how change happens. Coming together, Virginia, we are concerned, of course, about systemic issues, but the way to really change that is not waiting for politicians to get off their buns. The way to do that is to be activists and accountability specialists yourselves. We have to do that. So what we do at the table is try to inspire people and also empower people, give them the tools. This lady knew her history now about how black people suffer in the workplace. She knew that. And so she took that and used it as her sword to make some wonderful changes. So that is what makes me suit up and come to work every day. Thank you for asking that question.
Okay. I love the question because there are so many moving times that have moved me through the years, but the best is when I hear from a facilitator of a group about an exchange that happened in her group or his group that was an eye-opener, when the tears came and then the call came the next day from the people who were having the trouble with each other, black and white, and they resolved whatever it was that had hurt. The other place that I love is taking it to the streets. We're the practice room in my mind. We are the practice room at Coming Together Virginia. And so we give specific questions for people to handle at the table that reflect on their own experiences, black or white, because they're going to be different. And so we practice doing what has, in any other situation, feels uncomfortable. In the beginning, it feels uncomfortable for everybody in our circles, too. It gets to where it's not. It is natural. We talk about the things that are important. We talk about the things that are our history. We talk about the things we're confused about. It's all there. So my favorite experiences, ongoing and forever, I think, will be when I am with someone who doesn't look like me, who is obviously somehow culturally in a different place. And I'm in a public place, and we're having a lively conversation. And the people around notice that. it is a witness that is easy and fun for me. I love talking to, yeah, so yeah, to everybody, but yeah, but knowing that, and this person at the table next to us, the twosome, at Starbucks, is hearing an important conversation between two people who don't look like they should be talking to each other, and comes up and says, "Can I get in your conversation with you?" And it happens. It says, or, yeah. So those are the ones, and the hope from my perspective is that it just becomes natural. It should be natural. We're family that can talk together. We do need some help in the tools because we have not been family. And so that's what our facilitation does, is to give people tools to and some growing comfort level.
I like that, real toolbox.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're and our meetings are labs.
Well, Marcia and Danita, thanks for letting us be a part of your conversation tonight. Can we all give them a thanks? And thank you all for being here tonight. Our next faith and culture conversation will be on gun violence. We have a community police officer, Farad El-Amin, and one of the authors of Writing Our Way Out, Stan Craddock, will be here. And that's, what's the date for that, Kelly? It's the third Wednesday of every month. Oh, that's handy. There's a flyer. Excellent. Thanks for that. Okay, and Christine will.
Can we plug too? Is it okay? Okay. Just remember third Tuesday. I mean, it's not a very, except for December. It's not a very creative name, but it does tell you what night we will be meeting. Right now, we're doing a series on health disparities in the African American community and why that is. We had a huge event last night at Virginia Museum of History and Culture. The next two sessions will most likely be at Ginter Park Presbyterian Church in their fellowship hall. We have marvelous speakers, and we're very intentional. We make sure that all of the tables are very diverse. You will meet some new people when you join us. And if you want to get on the mailing list, just let us know, and that way you'll know. And you can visit our website as well.
Another plug. Just, you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you anyway. And it goes to your question again, in a way, that things that have moved me personally forward and a lot of other people I know. We have a book circle that meets. We have two book circles that each meet once a month, and we read together, black and white mixed group, things like Kindred, which Octavia Butler, like Water Dancer, like. Tell me, Black Future, yeah, well, not just, those are science fiction, but a lot of the heavy things, this month it's Begin Again, and deals with, for me, James Baldwin should be a part of everybody's library and read and reread. Yes. But not just The Fire Next Time, some of the things that came later. Begin Again goes through a lot of that. That one we're going to be discussing this Thursday, a week from tonight, in our book circle. So the books, the movies are fabulous for discussion. There are pilgrimages that go to the civil rights sites. All the way, we did an 8-day one with, what's the name of the organization? Living Legacy Pilgrimage. And that is well worth the cost of the ticket for the experience, or at least it was for us. So those are other things that also really are inspiring, but the meetings over the tables are probably the best.
Yes. Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Danita. I hope you guys are inspired to go and look at their website to have good conversations. This has been such a blessing to have a little conversation with you. I would just note that there are more refreshments out there for those who are here in person. We are grateful for those who have joined us on the live stream, but for those of you who are here, we can continue the conversation. So now, quickly, if you will pray with me. Good and gracious God, you invite us to recognize and reverence your divine image and likeness in our neighbor. Enable us to see the reality of racism and free us to challenge and uproot it from our society, our world, and ourselves. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. Thank you.